Hey everyone, and welcome to a video that is going to be all over the place. With October coming to a close, so too is the mini art challenges that haunt it, and this year I wanted to attempt one of these challenges myself, Cringetober, by @ICryInk on Tumblr. This is by far the largest art project I've ever done, but in the end I somehow managed to crawl towards the finish line. Spoilers, I guess. So for the sake of brevity and my own sanity, I decided to do some big art pieces that I recorded speed paints of and some smaller, simpler pieces with no footage. So get your leftover candy, settle in, and let's yap about some art. Alright, day one. I didn't decide to record my process until after completing the lines in base color, but I did really want to do some JoJo's Bizarre Adventure fan art for this project. I did try my best not to overuse any media, but there's multiple JoJo days here. A really big reason why I wanted to participate in Cringetober this year is I felt my art style has been pretty stagnant over the past couple of years. And over this past year, I have gained access to digital art. I have a Huion tablet that I've been messing around with, and I really wanted to push myself to experiment with things now that I have the availability to do so. So for good old day one here, I decided that I wanted to try and focus on dynamic posing, and how dynamic posing can change the negative spaces in your compositions, and really force the eye to look where you want it to. I was also trying to focus on adding more texture and color effects to things. As you can see here with the spotlight idea coming in, I do refine this a little bit later on. And finally, I wanted to focus on changing up my color palettes. I have a pretty bad habit of just defaulting to the same colors over and over again. I'm a pretty big fan of green, and that crops into pretty much everything that I draw, but I figured that trying out more limited color palettes, like with Dio's design here from the Eyes Over Heaven fighting game, could really help me push myself out of that. As with any new skill that you're learning, it takes a lot of time, so we're gonna see me bouncing back and forth on these ideas that I've been cooking on throughout this project, but I do think I eventually get to a spot where I'm happy with the growth that I've made over this month. Okay, I do want to talk a little bit more about how the three things that I'm focusing on do coincide with each other. So the dynamic posing, the lighting, and the texturing can all convey a story within your piece, and for my piece I wanted to convey the ominous feelings that you get from this character and what he does in this series. Dio is one of the main villains for this series, and in this game he gets his, I guess, good ending for a villain. He gets all of the power that he wants and executes his master plan. This all culminates in him being nearly unbeatable and overpowered, which I thought was pretty fitting for today's theme, which is overpowered. I also just really like Dio in every part of his story, so any excuse to draw him is one that I will absolutely take in a heartbeat. Same thing with Jotaro. Now I'm starting to come in with a bit of that texture that I was talking about earlier. I don't usually use really diffused brushes like this, but I start to warm up to them more throughout this project. I thought that really diffused look could help with the refraction of the light that's coming on top of these two characters, and just give that nice glowy effect, which if you've ever tried to draw dynamic lighting, I do think that glow is one of the hardest things to really convey in a meaningful way, but I wanted to roll my sleeves up and really try this time. And after a little bit of elbow grease and doing the final bits and bobs off camera, we have our completed day one. I'm actually pretty happy with how this day came out. Alright, so for day two, we pretty much instantly ignored that simplicity rule. The prompt for day two was weird colors, and I kind of did that, but I was focusing more on the relationship between color and value. All of the colors used here are either complementary or tertiary, but the level of saturation in these colors changes the way that they end up looking in relation to each other. This is one of my OCs, by the way. You're gonna be seeing a lot more of those throughout this project. Day three's prompt was chibi art, and I did actually try to do something simple this time. Woo! I've never done chibi art before, but I was trying to really focus on the simplicity and shapes that I find in chibi art, and also the variation in line weight. But despite my best efforts, I do think these lines turned out a lot chunkier than I wanted them to be. Day four's prompt is Fursona, but I'm not ready to share mine with the internet, so I did Pomni instead. I chose a leopard gecko for Pomni just because she just kind of looks like that. Her wide eyes and noodly limbs just really reminded me of every gecko I've ever seen. I thought it was pretty fitting. I tried my best to keep her shapes and colors consistent with her original design, since I thought that the leopard gecko shapes already complemented that, so I didn't really need to change much. Day 5 is Homestuck Day 2, Electric Boogaloo, but this time with my favorite character. The prompt was favorite cliche, and for me that is villain redemption arcs, especially when they're done well. I love a good villain redemption arc, oh my gods. And I do think despite the many flaws in Homestuck, Vriska's arc was actually handled fairly well, especially when you look at some of the complementary media that is alongside this series. I also didn't forget to record the line art process for this one, so enjoy that fun little treat. It's on the house. But on the art improvement side of things, for this day I did want to once again focus on more composition while adding in more background elements, since I'm not very good at that. I was also trying to focus on simplifying figures the farther away they get from camera, as you can see with Lord English there being kind of small, kind of dumpy. In the same vein as composition, I was also trying to focus on telling a bit of a story with the background elements. Like on the side with younger Vriska, I was trying to show a bit more of the messy, chaotic side of what she was dealing with and her life, and how she was just doing things. And on the other side, we see that she's a bit older. She's gone through a lot more personal progress and just events in her life that have shaped her into a more kind person who's more willing to take care of those around her instead of hurting them. I just personally really enjoyed seeing how this character changed and grew throughout the comics run. It was very nice to see. But that's not to say that she's completely flawless at the end of the story either. That's why I have her back towards the camera. She's not fully confident in herself yet, but she is trying her best to rectify the mistakes that she has made. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about that central lighting. I've never done a light source like this before, and I don't know if I fully did what I was really wanting to do with it, but in the end I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I was also once again trying to use the lighting to show a bit more of the story of this character again. Both versions of herself are turned away from this light, but the light source is coming from the weapon that she uses to defeat the villain of this story, which is Lord English. The younger version of herself would have never found this weapon if she hadn't grown, and the older version uses it with confidence. And now we have a finished visual story. For Day 6 prompt musicals, we once again completely ignored the simplicity rule, and while I do think that the composition is fun, I do think that I really fumbled the colors on this one. It's much more red than I really wanted it to be, and despite my best efforts, I just couldn't get it to a place where I was really happy with it. I also just don't think that text color is it. What was I thinking with the blue? But at least the source material goes hard. I love Phantom of the Opera. Unfortunately, the curse did follow us into Day 7. I think it's a fun composition, but I really fumbled the colors on this one too. That's supposed to be a sunset, but I think I just went too pink with the colors. It doesn't really feel like the sun setting. It just feels like a pink spotlight. One day I'll do these two pieces of media justice, but for now, they get mid fan art. We did redeem ourselves for Day 8 though. I think the amount of pink and purple here actually complement the piece instead of taking away from it. I also did a return to form and drawing nature from the background, which admittedly is a bit of a crutch in my compositions, but I do think it was pretty fitting for this day as it is a core aesthetic, and I decided to choose beachcore, or at least what beachcore means to me. And finally for Day 9 we have another attempt at simplicity. I do think that this character's simplicity in their shapes really did help lend to this, and I didn't try and go for anything too crazy with the composition, which was very tempting to do as surrealism is kind of the core aspect of this game, but I'm still happy with where this piece ended up. So for Day 10 we have JoJo Day, Part 2, Electric Boogaloo, but this time it's my favorite scene. In all transparency, I did misunderstand this day's prompt, but in a fun way. The maker of the prompt list did release a breakdown of what each day means in terms of the prompts, and overly complicated was supposed to be very complex designs, not very complex storytelling. And I did not look at that list until about Day 13, but that's okay. I still think we ended up with something fun in the end. I'm sure you've noticed, but the process does look a little bit different for this one. I'm using different colors for the lines, and that's just to help really differentiate between a bunch of the different elements that are going to be going on here. I've never really done a very, pulled in composition like this with a really harsh foreground and background, so using the different colors really did help with visualizing this. In that same vein, I did find it really difficult to balance this composition in a way that I felt was nice. I still don't really think this composition really feels balanced, but I'm still pretty happy with how it ends up looking in the end. This is one of the pieces where I do think that my line art brush was really kind of working against me with trying to get all these details. I think all of the lines ended up making it look pretty busy in places where it really shouldn't be. When you're slapping a bunch of lines in a specific area, it can either draw the eye towards it or make it look muddy enough that it's hard to really differentiate what's going on. And I do think that this ended up looking the latter, especially with Golden Experience right up there at the front. But despite my struggles with the composition, I do think the colors on this were actually really fun to do, especially once I get into the trippier background elements. I was a pretty big fan of the way this scene was represented in the anime, and it was really interesting to try and replicate it. My PC did start to struggle a bit with recording this at the same time. It is an older laptop, so the footage does cut in and out here when I'm doing all these like overlay layers and Lambert lighting and stuff like that. But we do eventually get there in the end, and after doing the bits and bobs off camera, we have a finished piece. Alright, so for day 11's prompt, it was crossover, and I did kind of mull over this a little bit longer than I probably should have, but I'm pretty happy with where I ended up. This is actually my first piece of the Owl House fan art that I've ever done, same thing with Pokemon, and I fear that my inability to draw animals is showing. Oh gods, Umbreon. But all in all, the time skip designs were actually really fun to draw. And for day 12, we have a banger in my humble opinion. This is my first attempt ever at doing like a magazine composition, and I had a lot of fun with it, especially with a lot of the little details. Like the Frutiger Metro background, the limited color palette swapping, and just all the little tiny text things that I wanted to add into here. And even though I'm already pretty comfortable with doing very colorful graphic designs, this was still really fun to try. Day 13 is another really colorful graphic piece, but this time we have a Fish Islands composition. This is my first time ever trying to do one of these, so there's a lot of like little cheats that I did. I don't think it quite like makes sense anatomically, but I still had a lot of fun trying it out. This is also the day where I had to look at the prompt list because animal traits to me just read as Persona 2.0. And day 14 was a really fun one just because of how much of my old art that I had to look through to really determine what was my first OC. And it is this little mad scientist Fraggle that I made when I was like 10. It's basically just Boober with a purple coat of paint and glasses. So day 15's prompt was first try, and I've already been doing a lot of first tries throughout this, but I wanted to do something that I really would not have done if it wasn't on a prompt list like this, and that is buildings. I have never really done a building like this with an actual background attached to it, and let me tell you, this day nearly broke me. Oh my goodness. It took me literally a day just to complete the lines alone. I did all of the coloring the next day. The original amount of time that this time-lapse was before editing it down was over 11 minutes. So cumulatively, this took me about, I think, 13 hours, somewhere around that ballpark. It was a long time for me. I also did have to do a lot of studying of references just to make sure that what I was doing actually looked like a building and I wasn't just throwing random stuff into a picture and hoping it would look good. I'd say just my Pinterest scrolling time alone took me a couple of hours just to find enough references to really feel like I understood what I was wanting to do. However, all that studying did eventually pay off. I feel like doing this day kind of unlocked something in my brain with understanding infrastructure, and some more building type backgrounds do end up cropping up in later days after all of my studying that I did here. I do want to talk a little bit about the vibe I was trying to go for here. I was going for a really like haunted kind of liminal space here with a completely empty roadways. There's no cars, no people waiting to get inside or coming out of the building. The door also doesn't have a doorknob or any way to open or close it, which I thought really added to the feeling that nobody should really be here, but eventually someone might end up here. You never know. I had pretty heavily considered trying to add some silhouettes or something to kind of add to that vibe, but I felt like it might contrast from the like hollow feeling I was trying to give this space. I also do want to talk a little bit about the colors here. I think this was one of the first days where I was really overusing pink. I was trying so hard to push myself out of using green for everything that I ended up just replacing my default color with another. And unfortunately, the vibrancy of this background color I think really did start to detract from my ability to like make this look cohesive. And later on, when I start adding in more of the lighting elements, it really like does not help with the darker, dingier vibe that I was trying to do. But I do think if I ever try to redraw this in the future, I'm definitely going to be changing the way that I did the colors here, probably working with like a darker pink or just an entirely different background base color. But I do think all in all that I'm pretty satisfied with how this came out on the whole, even if the colors isn't what I was wanting and the lighting didn't really fully pan out. This line art just took me so long that I was pretty happy with what I ended up doing. I'm honestly just really glad that after all of the struggles I had, I did end up with something that I really liked. Day 16 was kind of a weird prompt, so I did just elect to take a free space day, which the prompt list breakdown did say was appropriate for days where you didn't really know what to do with them. And I would like to lovingly dub this the start of what I call OC Mageddon. There's a lot of OCs that start cropping up from here on out. This OC is named Juno, and he will be making another return. Day 17 was OCX canon, but I'm not really that big on ships, so I did decide to just make this platonic. My little traveling OCs, Alaire and Fury, I thought they would get along pretty well with Snufkin, as a lot of their personal goals kind of line up, as they all don't like to stay in one place for too long and tend to help people wherever they go. So here they are, just fishing and chilling and grilling in the woods. Day 18 was an AU, and it was one of the first prompts that I really had a solid idea for. I've been working on human designs for a lot of the Amazing Digital Circus characters, and I am quite a big fan of Zooble and Gangle's dynamic, so I wanted to draw them in kind of a coffee shop AU. I'd like to think that Zooble works at this cafe and Gangle frequents it, as she is an art student at the local college. So enjoy this preview of their human designs. It's on the house. Day 19 was meme redraw, and there was a lot of things I was planning to do originally, but then the Knights of Guinevere pilot dropped, and I decided right after watching it that I really needed to do some fan art for it, so I decided to do a redraw of one of the promotional videos that they had done for some of the merch. So enjoy this really haggard looking Guinevere with a completely nondescript bottle. Okay, so for day 20, we had the prompt of animatic, and I did decide to do something that I've had thumbnails down for a little bit, but my old laptop really struck again here, and the footage corrupted of me doing the process of animating this, so I decided to just show the completed animatic in a slowed down version so you can see all of the frames nicely, and then I will have it at the appropriate speed at the end. These two are some of my favorite OCs. They have a story that is based off of a mix of Cyberpunk 2077 and The Phantom of the Opera. Juno, the one with the dark glasses, is a dead rocker from the 80s who ends up possessing this younger, up-and-coming pop star named Cy. But this ghostly possession, I didn't want it to look, super classical, so I did decide to give them physical changes for when this possession is affecting them. So that's why Silo ends up growing these demon horns in this tail shortly in the intro of this animatic. Their dynamic is also pretty toxic. Silo really does not like Juno. He kind of sucks. While his possession of her does give her a great boost in her musical abilities, it also comes with a lot of pretty hefty challenges in trying to keep this ability not only a secret, but she's also trying to make sure that the people around her don't get hurt, since this possession doesn't really leave her fully in control of her emotions or actions once she's off stage. And meanwhile, you have Juno just treating this like some sort of extended vacation where he gets to do whatever he wants and no one knows he's there. He's also pretty cocky and is pretty certain that Silo would not have made it without him, despite the fact that she absolutely would have. It would have just taken more time. Definitely keep an eye out for these two in the future. For day 21, we have the continuation of OC Mageddon with Silo, in color. The prompt was pit crew, but making pit crews are really overwhelming, so I just didn't do it. But I actually do really enjoy redrawing UIs. I do think it's pretty fun, so finding a way to kind of subvert the things you would expect from a pit crew was pretty fun in doing this as well. The fact that she's a certified creepy girl also did help with trying to change up the vibes of this as well. Now we have another OC. This dude's name is Hayden. He's from a much different story than Silo and Juno. He's in a much different style here than I usually draw him in, since day 22's prompt was style experiment, but his whole thing is basically just using his fire magic to help those around him in a pretty long story that I will eventually get done, hopefully. Now we finally get a break from the OCs with Devilman! Woo! The prompt for day 23 was soulmates, but I did want to try and subvert that a little bit with two very unwilling soulmates. I also did try to reflect their character dynamic in the way that they're posing, with both of them fighting the other off, but Rio is leaning into Akira more, and Akira is pushing just as hard as he can. Bro does not want to be here. I also thought it would be interesting if both of them were trying to cut the red string of fate that is connecting them. I will say that at the end of this piece, I was starting to get sick, and you see that reflected here in day 24 with this very simple composition that I really didn't have the motivation to do. I was just generally really uninspired and probably shouldn't have been drawing, but I did want to get this done. In the future, I do want to revisit this character redesign. I just did not have the energy to be doing what I was trying to do. So for day 25, the prompt was fake game screenshot, and I was really struggling with the idea on this for a while. It didn't help that I was also still recovering from being sick. So I did decide to do something a little more simple and just do, the classic character that should not be in Smash is now in Smash. So I decided, screw it, Hornet's in Smash now. I've never played Silksong, but I absolutely love watching playthroughs of Hollow Knight and Silksong. You just could not pay me to play Silksong myself. My goodness, that looks difficult. I am a really big fan of a lot of the writing and just general lore building and aesthetic that Silksong and Hollow Knight have going for it, though. And I did end up watching quite a lot of content related to the games when I was recovering from being sick. However, since I was recovering from being sick while doing this, I wanted it to be a relatively simple large piece, which is why I decided to save myself a lot of headache and just trace the background and add in the elements myself later on. However, drawing the UI did still end up being the longest part of this. Oh, and also the hunters here. I genuinely completely forgot I added them in here until just now. That was like a jump scare. Oh my goodness. But after doing the final bits and bobs off camera, we have a completed fake game screenshot. So after a little bit of a break away from the project, I came back for day 26 and decided I'm not sick anymore. It's time to do some fun compositions. I've been into Minecraft content since I was a literal child, watching some of my first YouTube videos on the internet, but I've only recently gotten into more RP content, and Vampires SMP was genuinely really good, so I wanted to do some fan art for it. I did this piece right after episode 4 was released. Oh, I want to go back to that time. Day 27 was Gajinkas, aka human designs made out of non-human characters, and I decided to do my girl, my baby, Shiny Floette. This is the most eye-straining shiny hunt I've ever done in Scarlet, my goodness, but it was worth it. She's gorgeous. I tried to capture my feelings on her by trying to make her look really, flowy and sweet. I'm not gonna lie, y'all, I got really lost in the weeds on this one, but Moomin is one of my favorite shows that I've ever watched, and I wanted to give, a love letter to something that I really enjoyed. I also decided to do a collage of all my favorite scenes since I really just couldn't pick one. I also tried to represent my love of this show's music with the music lines, but also using those same things to kind of guide the eye through a fairly busy piece. Day 29 is Homestuck Part 3, the final stuck, and when I think of Clown, Gamzee is the first and pretty much only thing on my mind. This is also my annual reminder to the Homestuck fandom that giving the trolls animal features is pretty fun, actually. For day 30, we have a jump scare of a big piece that I did not record my process for, but the prompt was creepypasta, and I once again could not choose a favorite, so I decided to do a collage of my favorites. I also decided to make this a bit of a narrative piece with all these characters coming together for a Halloween party. I also did kind of insert a lot of headcanons here about the characters and their personality and just generally tried to humanize the inhuman here. And for our final day, we have, fittingly, the final JoJo piece. I wonder what it says about me that 3 out of the 7 large pieces that I recorded were JoJo's, but, it's a good show. We've also got another narrative piece going on here. An extension of the Halloween party theme, but this time they're inside. Now, for part 4, Diamond is Unbreakable, this is my favorite cast of any group of characters, so I was really wanting to do at least something with the Morio Warriors for this project, and I'm glad I was able to fit them in a satisfying way here at the end. Oddly enough, I thought that the posing would be the most difficult part of doing this piece, but it was actually figuring out what Halloween costumes I wanted to put everyone in. But running through it, we have Jotaro in a very lazy witch costume, Yukiko and Koichi we have in matching angel and devil costumes. We have Rohan in a vampire costume, Remy in a ghost costume. I thought that was pretty fitting and self-explanatory. And then we have Josuke in a Frankenstein costume and Okuyasu in a cat costume. The only costume that I'm not really satisfied with is Okuyasu's. I don't really think it's that fitting for his character, but I genuinely could not think of anything else. I should probably talk a little bit about the art itself now. For this piece, I did decide to go with a pretty limited palette. I wanted to really just hone in on some nice spooky colors. I was also really focusing on trying to convey character personality and how they interact with one another. For instance, I don't know what Remy did here, but Rohan's going to get her. I'd also like to imagine that just narratively for this piece, this is Rohan's house, but he's not the one hosting the party. Koichi is. You can also really see my ADHD start to show when working on this, because I just start jumping around like crazy whenever I get bored of coloring in one spot. My only real gripe with this piece is that I don't think I really added enough decor. I probably just could have upped the Halloween party factor here by a ton, but I think I was just kind of tired from working on big pieces like this. Even though it was very fun, it did take a lot of energy and a lot of planning to do these pieces. It also didn't help that I refused to stick to the simplicity rule that I tried to set for myself at the beginning with my in-between days. They just kept getting more and more complicated, and I just didn't know how to restrain myself. I do think overall that I am pretty happy with how most of this project turned out, all 31 days. It was a pretty big undertaking to do all of this. If I'm being honest, I didn't really expect myself to really get through it. I've never really been able to commit to a big project like this, but maybe it's just something about getting older and becoming more dedicated as an artist. I don't know. But after mulling over this composition for a while and doing the final bits and bobs off camera, we have a completed piece. And there y'all go, my first ever fully completed October art challenge. I'm pretty excited to be able to put out this video. Please ignore the fact that it's coming out in late November. This is my first time editing together a video ever, and I had to do most of this on my phone. And I did not think that doing all of this would take me as long as it did, but I do really appreciate y'all's patience. But I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Estanco!